Hi, I'm Max Keiser, and this is the Keiser Report, covering all the markets, finance, and scandals around the globe. Let's bring in Stacey Herbert. Stacey Herbert.
Max Keiser, I brought you a present today.
What do you got for me?
Here.
Oh! What is that?
Well, I'm calling it Stacey Herbert Sunshine in a Can. It's a little bit of a plutonium mixed with uranium, because according to this first headline, Max, a glowing report on radiation. Yes, apparently radiation is good for you.
Oh!
So this is Ann Coulter, and she wrote on her blog that, regarding Japan, the good news is that anyone exposed to excess radiation from the nuclear power plants is now probably much less likely to get cancer. We did recently discuss agnotologic capitalism, and this is a prime example of it. Either using fake science or misleading using science, because there is research into the effects of radiation that can be positive in very, 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 very low dosages, not a nuclear meltdown.
Right, well, arsenic in very low dosages can have some mild beneficial health benefits, as I recall. But, of course, you wouldn't want to swallow a gallon of it. And, of course, Ann Coulter, I mean, this is how the misinformation, what do they call it? Antological capitalism.
Agnotologic.
Agnotologic capitalism, exactly. She's got the same kind of misinformation that gets people to think that radiation is good for you, man-made global warming is good, smoking cigarettes is good. It's manufactured ignorance.
Well, she wrote this on her blog, a little blog, which then gets amplified on Fox News if you look at this little video here.
Oh, right.
Glowing radiation, very, very good. But you are not down on radiation poisoning.
Well, it's not me. I'm citing a stunning number of physicists, and from the New York Times and the Times of London, there's a growing body of evidence that radiation in excess of what the government says are the minimum amounts you should be exposed to are actually good for you and reduce cases of cancer.
So that, of course, was Bill O'Reilly egging her on to, and you could even see in Ann Coulter's face that she's kind of laughing like she knows it's a joke. But that's the way they do it, is a shocking number, a stunning number of physicists believe I'm right.
Right.
And in fact, it would be shocking if there were one that believed she were correct to say, go on to Fukushima. It'll be very good for you.
All right. That wasn't on the payroll of Fox News and everyone like Murdoch. You know, this is yellow journalism taken to, you know, a radioactive extreme. It's radioactive journalism. You've got Murdoch, Fox News, Ann Coulter, Bill O'Reilly, who package dangerous lies and put that into the public space, hoping to protect the industrialists that they represent in their quest to dismantle the global economy and cause, you know, genocide.
Well, you see a similar thing in this next headline. Most Britons describe themselves as middle class. This is from the Telegraph, and they say the nation's perceptions come despite the rising cost of living and fears about unemployment amid the fragile economic recovery.
Yes.
The last paragraph then goes on to note that actually, you know, so 25% of Brits, less than 25%, even think they're working class, when in fact almost 50% are. This is the confusion with inflation. They think inflation's making them rich, not poor.
Right. You see, they can't distinguish what they do from, let's say, Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, who borrow money from the government at 0% interest rate, speculate, keep all the profits, and put all the losses into the public domain, whereas the average user, the consumer out there on the street, uses their credit card to affect the persona of a rich person, but their debts never go away. See, JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, they push their debts onto the government, who then pushes it on the people. But for somebody who goes into debt to affect the heir of someone with a lot of wealth, they don't understand that their debts don't go away. They're just being used as chumps, of course.
Well, all of these kind of combined in the next few headlines as well, in this confusion of what value or wealth is, and the confusion often caused by our own governments confusing us through misinformation. Sergei Alenikov gets 8 years prison sentence. As Zero Hedge puts it, the man who single-handedly almost stole Goldman's algorithm that could, quote, manipulate markets, that's according to the judgment, is now the person with the biggest prison sentence to come out of the entire financial crisis. Sergei Aleynikov has just gotten a 97-month sentence for doing absolutely nothing but copying some Goldman code that would never be recreated by anyone. In the meantime, the bank execs who should be in jail are currently benefiting from their co-opted Fed to allow them to collect taxpayer-funded dividend payments.
That's right. So the high-frequency trading code, or the algorithmic trading code used by Goldman to manipulate markets, to engage in high-frequency trading, to steal money every single day. Remember, they reported last year they had 2 or 3 quarters of straight profits, not a single down day, which is statistically impossible unless you're stealing using rigged markets. They, of course, are considered to be adding to the liquidity and market-making functionality, which are code word for smash and grab and larceny, and they are lauded as somehow adding to the economy. Meanwhile, this guy is exposing the real financial terrorist. He's a freedom fighter.
Well, a similar story is found in the next headline. British hacker jailed over £7 million virtual gaming chips scam. So this is Ashley Mitchell, 29. He broke into the Zynga mainframe, stole the identity of 2 employees, and transferred 400 billion virtual gaming chips said to be worth more than £7 million to himself. In reality, the guy sold 30% of the chips for £53,612, but they prosecuted him on what they could have been worth to him, which was £7 million.
Another freedom fighter. Now, we've been talking about Zynga for a while. They counterfeit money. They put counterfeit money into the system in the form of electronic, assetless, no collateral-based electron money that is diluting the value of the U.S. dollar, diluting the value. They are worse than the Federal Reserve Bank. A lot of people point to the Fed, and they say the Federal Reserve Bank is counterfeiting money, they're destroying the value of the dollar, and they use all of their banking connections to undermine the authority of the U.S. government. All true. But much worse is Zynga. Zynga is worse than the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, this story is incredible. They print up worthless electronic virtual currency. This guy hacks into the mainframe as a freedom fighter to stop the financial terrorism. Then he resells some on some open market for 50-something thousand in cash.
He sold them on Facebook to other people who want to use this to raise their virtual farms on Farmville or fight in the mafia wars, which these currencies are used. Now, this guy's lawyer said the loss to Zynga was impossible to quantify because the chips were virtual and the company could create as many as at once. He also said that Ashley Mitchell had enjoyed little benefit and spent most of the proceeds on online gambling on other sites that used real money, which is an argument you could make for the whole U.S. economy. Anybody who robs a bank to steal dollars is just using it to fund their debt habits, and it's no fun anyway. So I'm not guilty of anything.
Right, and the point is that if the judge finds this guy guilty, then he should find Ben Bernanke guilty. What is the difference between Zynga and Ben Bernanke? Bernanke doesn't have any collateral in which to float trillions of dollars worth of worthless fiat money. The only thing backing up the U.S. dollar, as has been pointed out on this show by many guests, is the U.S. military. That is to say, there's no intrinsic value to the U.S. dollar. The only value is if you recognize this as a medium of exchange. If you don't recognize it, we'll bomb you, we'll kill you. It happened to Saddam Hussein. It's happening in Iran. That if you don't use the dollar to trade oil and other commodities, we'll kill you. That's the only thing that backs up the U.S. dollar. That's the only thing that makes it of any value whatsoever. It, as a unit of currency, it's completely worthless. It's less than worthless. It's not even as valuable as a Zynga because people actually want worthless Zynga dollars to raise worthless virtual vegetables on worthless Farmville, part of worthless Facebook, which of course Goldman Sachs is taking public for $50 billion or more based on people voluntarily checking themselves into a casino gulag state known as Goldman Farmville.
Well, Judge Philip Wassel, in making his decision, said it is a considerable aggravating feature that someone hacks into systems in this way when so much business and personal finance is done using electronic means. Therefore, the sentence has to reflect on public confidence in security systems and online business when someone breaches security in this way.
No, he's completely wrong. Look at the Constitution. Look at what Thomas Jefferson had to say. I believe it's under Article 17, referring to copyrights. They should be of limited term and limited value. This is a copyright issue. And of course, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the Patriot Act, and all these guys who are destroying the intellectual property of the United States and the global economy using fake virtual currency that they're copying infinitely are challenging those who actually want to have real copies of real works of art and works of business ideas that are being pushed out of the intellectual property domain by these terrorists. Again, another freedom fighter takes on a corrupt judge.
You know, if this were true, if this judge were making an accurate decision that the use of these currencies can undermine the system, that they couldn't just be reproduced with a touch of a button, then we would see an effect of, say, Iraq, where $9 billion went missing like that. It just evaporated. And yet it didn't seem to undermine anything.
Excellent point. To my point, which is that the U.S. dollar is equally worthless and Ben Bernanke is equally culpable in an equally pernicious scam per this judge's definition, unless it's selective prosecution, which of course it is, in favor of the corporations versus the freedom fighters.
This also takes me on to the next headline. Are we about to see the first ever bonds backed specifically by the printing press? This is a headline from Joe Wiesenthal, legendary paperbug, who we just interviewed. Thanks to the Fed's ability to monetize the debt, to some extent, all U.S. bonds are backed by the printing press, but it's never explicit. Last night, news broke that Japan would issue rebuilding bonds worth 10 trillion yen, and it sounds as though they'll specifically be backed by the Bank of Japan.
Well, this is exactly what we're talking about. A central bank issuing electronic fiat nonsense and claiming it has value. It has no value other than the value to impose debt upon people, destroy the ability for honest commerce to take place with sound money, like gold and silver, and to further perpetrate the global enslavement of a population that is now turning against this form of virtual currency enslavement and revolting in North Africa, the Middle East, in Europe, in the United States, in Wisconsin, the global insurrection against banking occupation.
But there is a cost to it. There is a cost to printing up more yen, and that is to the savings, to the pensions, to those fixed incomes, to people's wealth, to workers' wealth, anybody who has to work for a living. It's no wonder that less and less people want to describe themselves as working class, because why would you want to work for a paycheck which is fixed, and yet the value of that fixed income is declining all the time?
Exactly, inflation. And why does Ben Bernanke, when he's in front of Congress or in these other central bankers, when they asked about inflation, they say that we don't see any inflation. In fact, we're scared about deflation. That's why we're going to print up another trillion of our fiat currencies to make our friends wealthy who trade it for fees and everyone else totally in debt as a slave. Thank you, Stacey, so much for being once again on the Keiser Report.
Thank you. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Don't go away. Much more coming your way. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Time now to go to Washington, D.C. and talk with Ed Harrison, former diplomat, bond trader, and now a blogger at creditwritedowns.com. Ed, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max. Good to talk to you.
All right, Ed Harrison, revolutions are sweeping the Arab world, sending oil higher. Japan faces nuclear meltdown, and the U.S. is about to hit another debt ceiling. Uses that momentum to launch another war. Putting aside the moral and strategic implications, is it a good idea fiscally?
I'm not as concerned about the fiscal ramifications because obviously it's not going to be as dire in terms of the outlays as compared to, say, Afghanistan and Iraq. I'm more concerned with what sort of what it means for instability, what it means for oil prices, whether or not this is the sort of permanent war status that that you expect to happen in the near future for the United States.
Right. Well, if you remember when the U.S. hit Iraq with shock and awe, the Chalabi and the Pentagon estimated the cost to be $50 billion, according